Elira Vane didn't remember the journey, only the roughness of the burlap over her face and the sting each time the wagon jolted. Her wrists ached where the rope had rubbed raw, and her ankles were bruised, tucked under her like a package no one cared to open. They hadn't even asked her name, just tossed her up like freight. She had tried to speak once to ask where they were taking her, but the answer came in the form of silence, the kind that wraps around you like cold metal. So she stopped trying, not out of fear, but survival. If they thought she was quiet, maybe they'd leave her whole. The wagon slowed. A chorus of voices rose in the distance, sluggish, drawling amusement, and then came the smell of stale tobacco dust and something sharp beneath it. The place wasn't named, but she knew what it was. A trading yard. Not for goods, for people. Rough hands pulled her forward. She stumbled. Someone laughed. "What's under the sack?" a voice called. "Hope she ain't squinty." More laughter. A voice near her ear, smooth practiced, $15. Strong, young, suitable for housework or whatever else you require. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her thoughts blurred, but one image stayed sharp. Her mother's hands braiding her hair by lantern light, humming songs about a future that never came. That memory held her together as the bidding began. 17, 20, 25. She quiet, someone asked. Mostly. Then I'll take her for 30. The auctioneer raised his gavel. And then, she's my wife. Everything stopped. A hush settled like dust. Elira's breath caught. The sack muffled sound, but that voice, it came from the side, calm and level, carrying just enough fire to be believed. Who said that? The auctioneer snapped. Boots moved. Someone stepped forward. I did. And you're about to take that sack off her head, or I will. The cloth was yanked away, and light stabbed at her eyes. She blinked hard, disoriented. Shapes blurred into forms, faces, hats, glinting buckles. But one man stood still, tall and lean, with a long coat dusted from travel. His face gave nothing away except his eyes. They didn't look at the crowd. They looked straight at her. "She's my wife," he repeated. Elira froze. She had never seen him before. But something in his voice didn't demand her compliance. It offered safety. The auctioneer laughed, nervous now. "She doesn't seem to recognize you. She's been through more than you could carry," the man said. "But that doesn't change what she is." And for reasons she couldn't explain, Elira did something she hadn't done in months. She nodded. "I'm his," she whispered. The words didn't feel like surrender. They felt like a door cracking open. The crowd stirred. A few shifted, skeptical. One man scoffed. "Where's your proof? You want papers?" The stranger asked, voice steady. "I'll bring you the man who faked the ones that put her here. He's in this yard. I'd bet my coat on it." That changed everything. A ripple of unease passed through the buyers. Not fear, uncertainty. The kind that rises when someone sounds like they know too much. And perhaps this man didn't. But he sounded like he did. That was enough. The auctioneer hesitated. "Take her," he finally said. "But if you're lying, don't expect mercy from the law." "I'm not lying," the man replied. Then he stepped forward and knelt beside Elira, not with force, but with a gentleness she wasn't ready for. He cut the rope at her ankles, stood and asked softly, "Can you walk?" She swallowed. "Yes." He didn't touch her, just stepped aside. "Then let's go." They walked together side by side through the same crowd that had moments ago debated her price. Now they simply watched. Maybe some expected her to collapse. Maybe some hoped he'd raise a hand or prove himself dangerous. But Elira just walked. Her steps unsteady, but her back straight. At the edge of town, beyond the last post of the trading yard, she finally whispered, "You lied." "Yes," he said. No apology. "Why?" He turned to her, really looking this time. "Because your hands were shaking under that sack. But your knees never gave out." "That means something. You don't know me," she said. "I don't need to," he replied. "I just needed them to stop." And in that moment, something shifted inside her. The part of her that had folded into silence didn't unfold yet. But it had started to remember what it meant to be seen. He didn't ask for her name, he gave her one. Wife. Not for possession, not for status, but to save her from being nameless again. And in a world that tried to erase women like her, that was the first thing that felt like freedom. The trail behind them stretched quiet, framed by golden grass and late afternoon light. Elira Vane walked in silence, every step still carrying the ghost of ropes that no longer held her. Beside her, Calder Wynne didn't say a word. He walked just enough ahead to make space for her to follow, not to lead her, not to claim her, but to remind her the path was open. By the time they reached the edge of a cottonwood grove, the sky had turned the color of copper. There, tucked against a low rise, stood a small cabin. Weathered wood, crooked shutters, and a porch that creaked under the wind. It wasn't much, but it stood. Calder stepped up the porch and opened the door without hesitation. Then, he turned to her, voice low. It's yours now, until you figure out what you want next. Elira hesitated at the threshold. The world had never asked what she wanted. She didn't move. Calder didn't push. Inside the cabin was bare but clean. A single cot with a wool blanket. A cold hearth. A small shelf holding a tin cup, a spoon, and a folded cloth that might have once been a towel. The place smelled faintly of cedar smoke and something softer like dry herbs and ash from a fire that had warmed more than just the room. He lit a lamp. The flame flickered to life and filled the space with a soft glow. It chased away nothingness, not darkness, just the kind of stillness that no longer frightened her. "You're not going to lock the door behind me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "No," Calder said without turning. "But if you want to lock it, the bar's leaning by the window." That answer broke something inside her, not from fear, but from the shock of being trusted. He wasn't testing her. He simply believed she should decide. He left her there and walked outside, the door left open behind him like an unspoken promise. "You can stay. Or go." Elira sat on the edge of the cot. The wood creaked beneath her weight. Her wrists still ached where the rope had dug deep, and when she reached up to touch her face, she felt the rawness left behind by the burlap sack. But the mirror in the corner reflected something different now. A woman sitting upright. A woman not owned. Calder returned with a small pot and set it over the hearth. "Stew," he said simply, "from the cellar." He didn't ask if she wanted it. He didn't demand she earn it. He just stirred the pot and handed her a bowl. She took it with both hands, unsure if she could trust the warmth inside it. She sipped once, then again. Her stomach starved of kindness as much as food curled in protest. But she kept eating. "I don't know how to trust this," she murmured. "You don't have to," Calder said gently. "Not today. Just eat, rest, heal." That simplicity nearly brought her to tears. No one asked for her story. No one made her prove her worth. They didn't talk much as they ate. But the silence between them wasn't hollow. It felt like a room finally left open after being locked for too long. Air stirring gently through cracks and spaces once filled with pain. Later, Calder set a canteen beside her and moved toward the door. "I'll be out front if you need anything." She didn't say thank you. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because some words still lived too deep in her chest. Instead, she drank from the canteen and lay down, the wool blanket pulling over her shoulders like a weight she could finally bear. That night, she dreamt of nothing. And in the morning, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, no one stood over her. No footsteps, no commands, no rough hands yanking her awake. Only birdsong. The warmth of sunlight pressing through the cracks in the wall. Her breath steady, her body aching, but her own. She stepped outside barefoot, the chill of morning air waking her fully. There by the chopping block, Calder was splitting wood. His sleeves were rolled, his brow damp with sweat. He didn't look up. Didn't greet her like she was fragile. "Sleep?" he asked over his shoulder. "I did," she said. "First real sleep in, I don't know how long." He nodded once. "Good." No questions. No sympathy wrapped in pity. Just that one word, good. She stood watching him for a while. Each swing of the axe was steady, precise, a rhythm of survival. Not violent, not harsh, just honest. "Can I help?" she asked. Calder paused only long enough to study her, not with doubt, but with recognition. Then he handed her a smaller hatchet. "You split the kindling over there." She nodded and walked into the pile. It wasn't easy. Her arms trembled. Her hands stung from old wounds. But with every strike, she felt something break loose inside her. Not pain, not rage, not strength. She was no longer the woman with the sack over her head. She was Elira. And Elira could split wood. It had been nearly a month since Elira Vane stepped off that wagon and walked away from the life they tried to force on her. In the quiet rhythm of each passing day, mending curtains, splitting wood, scrubbing floors, until they gleamed like small promises, she had rebuilt something she thought was lost. Not a home, not yet, but herself. The bruises on her wrists had faded to pale shadows. The nightmares had softened from screams to whispers. And every time Calder passed her a tool instead of a pitying glance, she felt more whole than she'd ever thought possible. Still, she hadn't gone back to town. Not since the day he'd claimed her, with a lie. Until now. "We'll need more seed for the garden," Calder had said one morning, packing flour and beans into a sack. "And the plow blade's bent. I can't fix that here." He looked at her then, not as if to ask permission, but to offer a choice. "You coming?" Elira paused. Fingers curled around the broom she was using. The porch boards creaked under her bare feet. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she nodded. Yes. She dressed in a plain skirt and rolled her sleeves. She tied her hair back in a knot that made her feel steady. There were no more shackles on her wrists, but she still carried their memory like a scar beneath her skin. They rode in silence, side by side on the wagon. The town slowly rose over the hills, like a ghost returning. When they passed the auction yard, Elira's breath caught for just a moment. The post was still there. The platform too. But this time no one could put her on it. The general store hadn't changed. The same squeaky porch, the same dusty windows. But the people inside did pause when she entered, some mid-sentence, others just long enough to glance, judge, or pretend not to see her at all. Calder greeted the shopkeeper without ceremony. Flour, sugar, 3 yards of twine. And the lady the shopkeeper asked, voice a little too smooth. Elira stepped forward. Thread. And if you've got it, something not meant for mourning. There was silence, then a reluctant nod. We might. No one laughed. No one whispered. Because the way Calder stood beside her said everything. This woman is not alone. This woman will not be touched. They were almost done loading the wagon when they heard shouting from the edge of the street. A girl barely 16 was being pulled by the arm by a man twice her size. She didn't scream. Her shoulders had the look Elira knew too well defeated. Like screaming had been punished too many times before. Calder moved instinctively, but Elira was already stepping forward. She stood between them, her voice calm. That girl's not yours? The man laughed rough and amused. You think she wants your kind of help? Elira didn't flinch. I don't think. I remember. Then she turned to the girl, and for the first time someone asked her, Do you want to leave? The girl blinked. Her lip trembled. It was like the question itself had cracked something open. She nodded, just once. The man stepped forward, anger rising, but Calder was there in an instant. Not aggressive, just steady. You'll want to think twice, he said. His hand never touched a weapon. It didn't have to. From the saloon porch, a deputy leaned out, arms crossed. Everything all right here. She's not his. Elira said, never breaking eye contact with the girl now standing behind her. The deputy looked at all three of them, waited. Then she walks, he said, and he rides out. And just like that, another thread of Elira's old life unraveled. And a new one took its place. Back at the cabin, this girl, her name was May, barely spoke. But she helped chop carrots for dinner, fetched water from the stream, and stared at Elira like she was something impossible. After they ate, Calder said little. He never asked what happened. He just cleared the bowls like it was normal to make space for someone who needed it. That night, as the fire cracked softly and May curled near the hearth, Elira sat by the open window, her arms wrapped around herself. You didn't wait for someone to choose you this time, Calder said quietly. Elira turned toward him. Her voice was low but clear. I finally realized I was never waiting to be chosen. I was just waiting to choose myself. And in that stillness, with a young girl sleeping safe just a few feet away, Elira Vane knew this wasn't about escaping the past. It was about interrupting its cycle, and she had done it with nothing more than her voice, her will, and the quiet kind of strength the world rarely noticed but never forgot. May stayed. She didn't say she would not out loud, but Elira saw it in the way the girl folded the blankets by the hearth each morning, or how she instinctively checked the chicken coop before breakfast. The cabin, which once echoed with silence and memory, now felt full, not crowded, just alive. Elira never asked May for her story. She didn't need to. Every bruised glance, every moment the girl flinched at the creak of wood, a raised voice from the wind told her enough. And May watched her too, watched the way Elira tied her hair back before starting the fire, the way she touched every tool with care as if it deserved a second chance, just like she had. One afternoon, while shelling beans on the porch, May asked, "Were you like me before?" Elira didn't answer right away. She looked out across the field, where Calder was fixing the garden fence, sleeves rolled and jaw clenched in thought. "I was like you," she finally said, "but I'm not anymore." May was quiet for a while, then said, "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "You don't have to stop," Elira replied. "You just learn how to stand, even while shaking." That evening, they sat together by the stream, washing laundry with cold water and rough soap. May asked questions not about the past, but about how to do things, how to hem a sleeve, how to boil roots without burning them, how to tie knots that wouldn't come loose. And for every answer Elira gave, she felt herself becoming something she never expected, not just healed, but capable of healing others. It wasn't grand. It wasn't sudden. It was a quiet kind of strength that slipped in between chores, between the stitching and the stirring, until one day she looked around the cabin and realized it had become ours. Not hers, not Calder's, ours. One morning, Calder paused at the doorway, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I've been thinking," he said. "We could build another room, something separate for May." Elira looked at him, startled, not by the suggestion, but by the softness in his voice. "You mean permanent?" she asked. "She already is." They built it together, Calder, Elira, and even May. The walls weren't perfectly even. The roof still leaked in places. But every nail, every splinter, every bit of sweat became a declaration. This place isn't just survival. It's sanctuary. And it was during one of those afternoons, while Elira sanded the new window frame, that Royce Harlan rode in. She spotted him before Calder did the shimmer of a belt buckle, the practiced ease of someone too clean for trail work. May froze on the steps. Elira didn't flinch. The man pulled his horse to a halt, dismounted with a smirk. "Afternoon," he drawled. "You must be Miss Vane." She said nothing. "I work for a man who says you left owing him something." Elira stepped forward, arms folded, voice like stone. He bought silence. Obedience. A girl with no choices. But none of that's for sale anymore. Royce tilted his head. "Brave talk." "She doesn't need to be brave," Calder said, stepping out of the barn behind him. "She just needs you gone." Royce glanced between them, calculating. Then his eyes settled on May, and his smile twisted. "She your little project now?" "Thought you'd try being someone new." Elira stepped fully in front of May. Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. "You want something from me," she said. "Tell your boss to ask himself." "But I won't be gagged. I won't be covered. And I won't be claimed." Royce looked at her long and hard. "You'll regret talking like that." Elira held his gaze. "No. I regret not saying it sooner." He left without another word. And this time, as the dust from his horse settled into the dry earth, Elira didn't feel fear crawling up her spine. She felt pride. Later that night, as the three of them sat on the porch, May leaned against the post, chewing slowly on a piece of cornbread. "You didn't need him," Calder said to Elira, nodding toward the trail Royce had vanished down. "Not this time." "I needed you," she said quietly, to stand behind me. "Not in front of me." Calder smiled, a rare, steady thing. No promises, no vows, just trust. And in that moment, with a girl safe beside her and a man beside her, not as protector, but as witness, Elira realized something deeper than freedom. She hadn't just survived. She had become the thing she once waited for. Not a rescuer, not a savior, but a woman who stood unclaimed and chose to open the door for someone else. It was a Sunday morning, warm, clear, and slow, like syrup over the hills. The cabin creaked softly with the rhythm of routine water heated over the hearth bread rising in a cloth-lined bowl, May humming under her breath as she swept the porch. Elira Vane stood in the basin, rolling up her sleeves. Her arms were sun-darkened and marked with fine cuts from fence work and wood splitting. They weren't the arms of the woman who had once stood trembling in a burlap sack. These were the arms of someone who made things grow. Calder came in with a small package in his hand. "Trip to town?" he asked casually, though his eyes held something steadier. Elira wiped her hands dry. "What for?" "Thread, nails, some seed, maybe something else." She raised an eyebrow. "Something else," he shrugged. "Maybe it is just time." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Let me braid my hair." She dressed simply, no ornament, no lace. Just her work dress, the one with sun stains and a patch she'd sewn herself on the hem. In the pocket, she tucked the silver comb Calder had once handed her without ceremony the day she walked into town and didn't flinch. They rode side by side, the wagon wheels creaking over the dry path. May stayed behind this time, waving quietly, a broom in one hand, like a symbol of the home they were keeping upright together. The town rose ahead. Not taller, not changed, but smaller somehow, like it had shrunk under the weight of the people who once tried to bury her in silence. Elira didn't hesitate when they passed the auction post. She didn't look away. She didn't even blink. She only adjusted her posture and sat straighter, as if her body remembered the weight of being owned and refused to ever bow again. At the general store, the bell above the door gave a sharp chime. Miss Calder, the shopkeeper, looked up and froze for a breath before giving a stiff nod. "Morning," Calder said. "We need thread," Elira added, "and some cloth. Not black if you have any." Miss Calder didn't reply at first. Then she turned toward the shelves. "We might," she said. While Calder handled supplies, Elira moved through the shop with quiet purpose. She touched fabrics. She ran her fingers over buttons. Every movement was ordinary, but the kind of ordinary that had once been denied to her. Outside, as they were loading the wagon, Elira paused. There was a commotion near the old auction post. A man arguing with a younger woman. She was no older than May. Her eyes flicked toward Elira with something between fear and pleading. Calder saw it too. But Elira was already moving. She stepped off the wagon and crossed the square, every footstep a sentence. The man was mid-accusation when she placed herself between him and the girl. "That girl doesn't belong to you," Elira said, calm but immovable. The man laughed, a sound used to working. "You don't know what you're talking about." Elira didn't respond with anger. She turned to the girl. "Do you want to leave?" she asked. The girl looked confused at first, then nodded, just once. The man lunged, but Calder's shadow fell across them before his arm could rise. "You need to think carefully," he said, not raising his voice. A deputy appeared, slowly chewing a twig. "What's happening?" "She's not his," Elira said. The girl moved behind her close enough that their shoulders brushed. The deputy looked at the man, then at Elira. "And the girl?" "She walks," the deputy said. "He rides." And just like that, another thread snapped clean from an old rusted chain. They didn't stay long after. The girl walked with them back to the wagon and climbed up without a word. She held her hands in her lap the whole way back. But when the wind caught her hair, she didn't flinch. That night, the cabin was quiet again. The fire crackled low and Calder carved something on a plank of wood. Elira watched from the doorway, her arms crossed the new girl, Anna, sleeping by the hearth. When he finished, he held it up for her to read. It said, "Home of the woman who wasn't bought." Elira stepped forward, touched the letters with her fingers. "It's too much," she whispered. Calder shook his head. "It's the truth." And in that moment, the truth didn't need shouting. It didn't need proof. It didn't even need permission. It just needed someone brave enough to live it. Elira Vane no longer counted her days by what had been taken from her. She counted them now by what she'd built. The new room Calder had helped her add to the cabin creaked gently in the wind. its wooden beams still fresh with the scent of sawdust and new beginnings. Anna, once a stranger, now a thread in the very fabric of their lives, had painted the shutters a warm, hopeful red. They chipped already from weather, but Elira liked them that way, because things that were real didn't need to be perfect. Each morning, Elira rose before the sun. She stoked the fire, stretched her arms, and walked barefoot across the floor she had mended with her own hands. And as the light poured through the gaps between the slats, she remembered not with pain, but with precision who she had once been. Not to stay in the past, but so she could honor the distance she had traveled from it. May still slept by the hearth, curled under the blanket Anna had sewn. Calder was out early most days, tending the fence or breaking the ground for spring planting. And when Elira stepped onto the porch, she didn't brace herself for eyes or for judgment. She stepped out as herself. That was enough. One day news came from town. A new law had passed. No more public auctions. No more ownership dressed in contracts. No more trades dressed up as mercy. The town didn't say it was because of Elira. They didn't print her name in any official notice, but they whispered it in corners. They spoke of the woman who once stood silent beneath a burlap sack, and who now walked freely, head held high, with girls at her side who no longer trembled when a man raised his voice. Mabel Quinn rode up a few days later. She was older, sharp-tongued, but honest in a way Elira had come to respect. "They talk about you in town now," she said, handing over a fresh loaf of bread. "Say you started something." Elira only shrugged. "I didn't start it. I just refused to be ended." Mabel stared at her for a long beat. Then she smiled, a real one, not out of politeness, but pride, while she said, "Mounting her horse again, whatever you did, you made 'em look in the mirror. Most don't like what they saw." After she left, Elira sat on the porch, her hands resting in her lap. Anna came and leaned against her shoulder. May brought out the sewing basket and sat cross-legged nearby, humming an old tune someone had once taught her in a safer time. Calder returned that evening carrying something tucked under his arm. A new plank of wood, this one smoother, carved with care. He walked to the gate and nailed it gently into place. When Elira stepped closer, she saw the words etched into the grain. The Ward Place, home of the woman who wasn't bought. Her breath caught, not because it was too much, but because it was true. It wasn't a boast. It was a marker, not for anyone else's memory, but for hers, for every time she doubted whether the world had changed. For every girl who might one day pass by and wonder if hope could root itself in scorched soil. That sign said yes. And not because someone allowed it, but because she built it herself. As spring turned the trees greener and the creek louder with snowmelt, Elira grew quieter. Not from fear, but from peace. She didn't speak often of the days before, only when someone asked, and even then she spoke not of what was done to her, but what she did with what was left. She taught Anna how to plant onions in rows. She showed May how to sew sleeves strong enough to last through winter. She told them, "Your voice is like your breath. If someone tries to take it, fight to keep it. Even if the fight is silent." They listened. They learned. And one morning when Calder asked if she wanted to visit town again, Elira smiled and said, "Not yet. I don't need their blessing to know I'm whole." The garden grew fuller, the cabin stronger, their laughter louder. And when strangers passed by on the trail, they stopped and read the sign at the gate. Some kept riding. Others dismounted and offered help or stories, or just silence and a nod of understanding. But no one asked for Elira's name like they were owed it, because that name now belonged to her. It was carved in wood, not in chains. And when people spoke of her later, whether in town or by fireside or in stories passed down, they didn't start with the auction. They started with the moment she said, "I'm his." And what she really meant was, "I am mine." This story reminds us that dignity isn't something we wait to be given. It's something we quietly reclaim. No matter how far we fall, the path to healing begins with a single choice to stand to speak and to protect what remains true. For those who have carried silence too long, Elira's journey offers a quiet truth that we are not the worst thing done to us. Restoration doesn't need permission. It begins the moment we stop waiting to be chosen and instead choose ourselves. And in that brave choice, we light a path for others to follow.